So welcome back, coders, and hope you're having a great time and you're not giving up on coding. So in this video, we're going to talk about the useReducer hook. So the hook we're going to talk about is the useReducer hook. So I can delete all this. Delete this. Let me also delete this. So the hook we're talking about is the useReducer. So I can delete this. And the hook we're talking about is the useReducer. Now, the useReducer hook is similar to the useState hook, but instead for the useReducer hook, what it does, it allows for custom state logic. It means that you can pass in logic as by your side of your state. So if you find yourself keeping track of multiple pieces of state that rely on some complex logic, like the state you keep relies on some complex logic, maybe if someone passes, let's say maybe you have a state of, let's give an example of to-dos, but to keep track of that state, there's some logic. Maybe the to-dos have to be checked, maybe the to-do you have finished 50%, and so it requires logic to update that state. So you can use the useReducer. Now, the useReducer, it has a format. It has two arguments. It takes in the reducer, and then it also takes in the initial state. So the reducer function contains your custom state logic. So this reducer function that you pass in, this one which is highlighted here, it takes in your custom state logic. And then the initialized state can be a simple value, but generally will contain an object. Usually the initialized state contains an object. Now the useReducer hook returns the current state. So this useReducer hook, when you call it, to return the current state and to return a dispatch method. Now the dispatch method is what will help you to update the state or to change the state according to certain maybe actions or something you want to carry out. Now here we're going to do an example of how to use useReducer in, for example, a to-dos app. So to use useReducer, we're going to first need to import it. To use useReducer, you can go to your first line of code, and then you can say import. Then you're going to say useReducer. Then the useReducer, you import the useReducer from React. So after importing the useReducer from React, you put in your to-dos or your custom to-dos. So the to-dos I'm going to put in here, just let me put Ctrl-Z. The to-dos I'm going to put here are just simple to-dos. Two to-dos. The first to-do has an ID, it has a title, and then it has complete, whether the to-do has been completed or not. So here the to-do is saying false, the to-do has not been completed. Here it's saying false, the to-do has not been completed. Now I need to create my to-dos component. So to create my to-dos component, I say function to-dos. Then after creating my to-dos component, let me return something. So return. So what I'm going to return, let me just return some boiler. So here I'm just going to put in my wrapper. Then the render function should render out my to-dos. So the render function is now rendering out my to-dos. So now let's define more things in the to-dos. Now the first thing we're going to define in the to-dos is our useReducer. So to define something in the to-dos as our useReducer, we're going to say const to-dos. Now what the useReducer does, it returns, remember, our current to-dos, and also it returns for us a dispatch function. Unlike the useState, which returns for us our current state, and then it returns for us a function that can help also change the state. But in this useReducer, it returns for us a dispatch function. So I'll say useReducer. Now the useReducer takes in two things. It takes in the reducer, now in the reducer, that's why you put in your custom logic, and then it takes in the initial to-dos, which I already defined here as our initial to-dos. But now we need to define our reducer. We need to define our reducer function. So we go back above and start to define our reducer function. So you can say const reducer equal to. Now our reducer function, every time we're going to call the dispatch function to change our state, this useReducer function will always run. It will always run our reducer function. So this useReducer, every time we call our dispatch function to change some state, it will have to run our reducer function, run this logic. But our dispatch function, we shall have to pass in an action to our dispatch function. So now our dispatch function takes in two arguments. It takes in the state. Now this state, when I'm calling my dispatch function, I don't need to define it. The useReducer will automatically put in the state function, and then I need to pass in my action. So after that, I can use a switch condition. So I'll say switch, then I'll say action, whatever action you have passed in, dot type. So after saying action dot type, I'll make my first case. If it is complete, what I would do, I would just have to return state dot map. Now inside there, the map, remember map takes in a function. So I define the function that map takes in. So state, then I'll say to do. Now I have to define the things in my map function. So in the map function, I'll say if to do dot id, if to do dot id is equal to action dot id, that if the whatever, remember the action I'm going to pass in will be an object, and then the action object will have two keys in it. It will have the id, it will have the type. So if that action id matches the to-do id, it means that is the current to-do that I want to work on. So if it's the current to-do that I want to work on, I'll just say return, because now the case I'm in is complete. Someone has completed the to-do, so I need to change this complete variable in the to-dos to true. So I'll just return. I'll return an object. In the object, I'll spread my previous to-dos. After spreading my previous to-dos, I'll put my complete. Then I'll reverse the to-do dot complete. To-do dot complete. So then I'll put on my else. So else, I'll just return the to-do. If the two IDs don't match, just return the to-do. That's not the to-do I want to. That's not the to-do I want to change. So it will go through all the to-dos. This state function will go through all the to-dos until the to-do which I reach a to-do that matches the action, matches the action ID. So after this, I'm going to now define my default. If it's not complete, if my action.type is not complete, I should just return the state. So return the state back. So now this is my reducer. This is my reducer function. Now, after making my reducer function, I can come back to my to-dos and then put in some HTML here. Remember, I already used the useReduce here. Come back to my to-dos and put here some HTML. Now, the HTML I'm going to put here, I'm going to open my curly brackets and define some JavaScript. So in my JavaScript, I'm going to say to-dos dot map. Now, so from to-dos dot map, I'm going to pass in my function. And then in the function, I'm going to pass in a to-do. Function will be taking a to-do. Now when when I take in a to do, this is what I'm going to do, something simple. I won't have my div here in my to do. Let me take this back. So I'll have a div. Now the div that I'll have, it will take in the key so that it can neatly identify that to do. Then I'll have a label. Then I'll have checked. So the checked feature of the input element will depend on the what? On my initial to do's. If my initial to do's show false, it means that my checked will be false, so the box will not be checked. Then when an on-change event happens, when someone changes it from true to false or from false to true, I have to call in my event handler or my event handler, the handle complete function. Now the handle complete function, I'll have to pass in the to do, the handle complete function. Then here I'll print out my to do the title. Now we have to define our handle complete function. So to define our handle complete function, I'll come here down in the code, then I'll say const. Then from the const I'll say to do's. Then I'll say const handle complete. Then I'll say it will be equal to my to do like that. So that will be my handle complete function, which takes in an argument as to do. So after taking in argument as to do, to change or to update my state or to update my to do's, I have to call the dispatch function. So I'll call the dispatch function. Now when I call in the dispatch function, I need to pass in an action to the dispatch function. So the action I'll pass into the dispatch function will be the type. So the type I'll pass into the dispatch function will be complete. So I'll pass into the dispatch function complete. Then I need to pass into the dispatch function ID. Then the ID I'll pass into the dispatch function will be to do.id. That's what I'll pass into the dispatch function. Now, but here when I define the dispatch function, I put in two arguments, the state and then the action. The reason why when I define the reducer, I put in the state and the action. But the dispatch function, what the dispatch function does, it takes in the action. So when a dispatch function takes in the action, the useReducer, it will call our reducer function. So when it calls our reducer function, it will now have, since the dispatch function has provided with the action, it will pass to the reducer function the state, because remember we passed to it the initial state, which is the initial to do's. It will pass to our reducer function the state and then the action which I passed in the dispatch function. And now the reducer function will carry out some logic according to whatever action I have specified, do some changes, and then there we are okay. So that is how the useReducer the useReducer hook can work. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I should see you in the next video.